In the next 5 minutes, we're going to learn how to look up ICD-9 diagnostic codes. This presentation assumes you have watched the overview of the ICD-9 codebooks Part 1 and 2, and you have some familiarity with your codebook. So starting in Chapter 4 of your textbook, you will be given the opportunity to learn and apply coding guidelines to diseases and conditions in much greater detail. But for now, we're going to start with the basics. Our very first step in looking up codes is identifying the main term. Here are your guidelines. It's not the anatomical site, or is it the adjective or further description for the condition? It could be an eponym, which is a condition name for a person, and these are listed under that name or under the main term disease or syndrome with a subterm of that name. Let's practice identifying the main term. For number 1, we have fracture right radius. What's the main term? It would be fracture, since radius describes the location or anatomical site. How about myocardial infarction? Well, if you thought it was infarction, you're correct, because myocardial describes the type of infarction. How about foreign body and eye? Well, it can't be eye, so the main term is foreign body. How about chronic otitis media? It would be otitis, because chronic and media further describe the type of otitis. Do you remember that otitis is an ear infection? If you're not familiar with these terms, look them up. Google can be a great resource. So our basic steps for coding diseases start with number 1. We're going to locate our main term in the alphabetic index. Remember that you have tables for hypertension and neoplasms. If you haven't located these tables in your indexes yet, you may want to pause the recording and do so. Some students prefer to add tabs to their code books for quicker reference. So we're going to review the alphabetic index closely, looking for any kind of directional terms or cross-references. You may have to search multiple columns or even pages. Then you're going to look for your subterms or essential modifiers which provide additional information on that condition. Make sure that you review the non-essential modifiers as well. It can be helpful to underline the main term to help you recreate your process when learning to code. Next, you're going to write or remember the code you came up with from this alpha index, and then look up the code in the tabular index. Remember, never code from the alphabetical index, as you may miss important notes. So our last step is we're going to verify the code from the alpha index in the tabular list of diseases. So what we're looking for in the tabular list is any indicators for extra digits, includes and excludes notes, and additional notes if we need multiple or additional codes. Let's try to code now. Our first example will be Q fever. We look up Q fever in the alpha index starting with Q. You will see you get 083.0. If we had pneumonia, first of all, note the indentation, and then second of all, note that there are those brackets. These tell us that we must use 2 codes. However, for this example, we just have Q fever and only 1 code is needed. So the next step is we look up 083.0 in the tabular index, and here it is in our tabular index or tabular listing, and you see 083.0 Q fever. We have no other indications that we need a 5th digit, so we have the proper amount of digits. And then note there's a little CC grade box, which means that Q fever is a complication or comorbidity, which we will learn about in later chapters. Let's try another one, idiopathic epilepsy. Our main term is epilepsy, so we search for epilepsy in our alphabetic index. Here's an example of what it looks like. You'll see we have epilepsy, epileptic, followed by idiopathic in parentheses. Remember, the parentheses mean that's a non-essential modifier, so code 345.9 is the correct code. We also see that we have an information box, which means we need a 5th digit. So let's look at the tabular listing to explore the 5th digit. So when we go to 345.9 in epilepsy, we see that we need a 5th digit. Where do we find the 5th digit? Well, we're going to go backwards or in reverse numerical order, back up to the informational box underneath the category. So our choices in this box is with or without intractable epilepsy for our 5th digit. Remember, we never want to give the patient a disease or condition they don't have. Since there's no indication or documentation that there is intractable epilepsy, we're going to select the 5th digit of 0 without intractable epilepsy. So the proper code is 345.90. Let's try one more. We have infection due to surgery. Our main term is infection. We find it in the alphabetic index, and we see just one quick thing that we right underneath infection. There's a with, and then it proceeds to the alphabetical listing. We need to find due to. You're going to have to search through because there's multiple columns in this one. So we find due to or resulting from surgery, 998.59. Since we never code from the alphabetical index, we look in the tabular. And there we have it, 998.59, other post-op infection. Congratulations, you've just completed